Druid has been one of the strongest supports for endgame PvE content in Guild Wars 2 for several years now, but despite that, there was never a really good option for a DPS Druid build, which was a little bit odd since the game's philosophy is to play how you want. A hybrid healing and damage Druid has always been possible, but never really a full damage Druid, at least until now. Recently, they reworked some of the Druid traits to allow a full DPS playstyle due to the Blood Moon trait. This makes your CC and immobilizes now bleed the target, which means that many of your skills before, which only provided utility and no damage, can now be used to fill in the gaps of a DPS rotation. And also there are plenty of pulsing immobilizes, which trigger this effect many times just with one single cast, which gives tons of value. So in this video, I'll be going over the conditioned DPS Druid build for endgame content, like strikes and raids. But if you want to slap on some Celestial or Plague Doctor gear for a more open world build, you could do that. I just won't be covering that in this video. If you want more similar builds, then check out guildgen.com. That being said, let's get into the build. I go for full Viper stats with the Rune of the Crate. We want precision, condition damage, and condition duration. So Viper is going to give us the best of that, and bleeding is going to be our main condition. So Crate Rune is going to be the most obvious choice for that. I go for the Relic of the Fractal because it gives you some extra damage on your conditions, and it doesn't really require you to play around it. It just kind of happens. So it's nice to allow you to focus on the rest of the build. Then for the weapons, we have an axe and a dagger, and then a dagger and a torch. Now we're going to be using a Earth Sigil in both sets, and then on the axe use a Doom Sigil, and in the dagger in the other weapon set you want to use a Geomancy Sigil because this is more of the melee set, so you want the Geomancy there, and then Doom allows you to use it more ranged on the axe, which has a more ranged setup. While Geomancy Sigil is better than Doom Sigil on this build, you still want to go for different sigils for swapping here because of the Celestial Avatar. This will trigger your swap sigil, so you want different sigils because you can trigger it twice. So what we're going to be doing is going into Celestial Avatar to trigger the current weapons sigils, and then swapping weapons to trigger the next set. And then just repeat, go into Celestial Avatar, trigger them again after like 9 seconds, swap, get the next set, and so on. For traits, go for Skirmishing and Wilderness Survival. Sharpened Edges is better than Trapper's Expertise because going for all the traps does a lot of damage, but every single thing that we do in this build can crit, and therefore we're going to get a lot of bleeding anyways, and that allows us to go for other utility skills that might be better for bleeds anyways. Then we're going to get extra bleeding damage from Hidden Barbs, and we've got a lot of crit chance on this build from Hunter's Tactics and Vicious Quarry, so every time that we crit we have a chance to give bleeding. And this is better than Light on Your Feet because we're not using a short bow, and Quick Draw can be kind of weird with the Druid because sometimes you get it on skills that you don't want to quick draw, so we're going to go for Vicious Quarry in this case. Then in Wilderness Survival we'll go for Taste for Danger for a little bit more condition duration, and Ambidexterity because you get more condition damage, and we're using a dagger in both of our sets, so we're going to get the maximum value from that. And then go for Poison Master because we do still do a decent amount of poison, and that's going to be increased. Then in Druid, take Blood Moon, which gives the bleeding from your daze and immobilizes. This is going to make many of your skills that didn't do damage before now do damage. And then go for Natural Balance, which gives you extra condition damage and duration shortly after entering and leaving your Celestial Avatar. So we just want to keep going in and out as often as possible. And then we've got Eclipse, which gives extra conditions on your Celestial Avatar abilities, most notably the 2 skill, which gives poison now, the 3 skill, which now gives an immobilize, so that's now a daze and an immobilize, so it's going to trigger Blood Moon twice, and then Eclipse also gives burning on your Celestial Avatar 5 skill Natural Convergence, which pulses that burning many times. So if you look at Entangle here, it gives bleeding already, but it's going to give a lot more bleeding because it's going to be triggering all of the bleeds from Blood Moon now, and that's going to give a lot of bleeding on just one animation. So casting Entangle is your highest priority skill. Your other utility skills like Spike Trap, Sharpening Stone, and Glyph of Alignment all will do a good amount of bleeding too, so just use these when you can. And of course, Spike Trap is probably the hardest to land because you need to stand underneath the enemy to hit them with it, and it gives a little bit of CC. So just use these whenever you can in the rotation, but you want to fit those in when it's convenient to do so, because what we're going to be doing is going into Celestial Avatar when possible to keep up those buffs that we mentioned earlier. And in Celestial Avatar, you really only want to be using the 2 skill, which is a no animation poison, so you can use this whenever. And then the 3 skill, which is a very wide range daze, that gives a lot of bleeding too. And then Natural Convergence will pulse burning to nearby enemies, and then if it hits the final hit, it will summon a black hole, which will then pulse immobilize. So you want to make sure you get that last hit and that the enemy is not moving. So essentially the order is not important, but you want to make sure that you land your Natural Convergence. So delay it or use it earlier depending on when you think the boss is going to stand still in that. Once you leave Celestial Avatar, you want to be using your weapon skills and then swapping weapons shortly after. So the most important weapon skills are the Axe 2. You can see this does tons of power and condition damage, and it's a very low cooldown. Then you've got the Axe 3, which also does a lot of damage. Dagger 4 and 5 are not as important, so you want to make sure you're using your Axe 2 and 3 off cooldown, and then 4 and 5 when those are on cooldown. And then when your Celestial Avatar has just been used, you swap to your Dagger and Torch set. The most important skills in here are Dagger 2 and your Torch 5. Use those first, and then you can go for your Dagger 3 and your Torch 4. When your Celestial Avatar is up again, go in, use the 5, 2, and 3, and then come out, use your 2 and 5 if they're up, and then swap, use the Axe 2, 3, 4, 5, and of course use your utilities in between there. The pets I use are the Iboga and the Jacaranda. The Jacaranda does a pulsing immobilize, so this does a lot of damage. And whenever you use your F2, remember that this will give you the Poison Master, which gives a little bit more poison damage as well. Be sure to control right click on the Jacaranda's F2 skill so that it casts it off cooldown automatically. And then the Iboga is just really nice because it also has a CC on it. So swap to this when you need a CC. So I'm going to start by using Entangle and Glyph of Alignment and Sharpening Stone probably precasted. And then I want to use Axe 2 and 3 because I want those to be on cooldown while I'm in Celestial Avatar. And then they can be used as soon as I leave. And then we'll swap weapons from there. So let's use these. Axe 2, 3, CA 5, 2, and 3. I'm going to leave. My 4 and 5 are going to be up. I'm going to swap now because I want to get those weapon swap cooldowns. And then I just use whatever's off cooldown now while I wait for my Celestial Avatar. My utilities are coming up. I can go in immediately, use the CA 5, 2, 3, and then use the 2, 4, 3. I'm going to wait for the 5 skill here because this does a lot of damage. And since my 2 is almost up, I'm going to do that as well. Swap, do the 2, 3, 4, 5. And I've got some cooldowns here, so I'm going to use these. Axe 5 used. I'm going to go into CA. 3, leave, use a 2, 4, 5. I'm going to swap. 2, 5, 3, 4. And I can use my Healing Spring here as well to cleanse allies. Sharpening Stone and my Entangle are up. CA is up, so I want to use that. Go in with the 2, 3, and 5. Dagger 2. Spike Trap. I'm going to wait for the Bonfire a little bit because that does a lot of damage. Swap now to get these swap sigils. 4 and 5. I can use the 5 again. I'm going to use my Axe 2 before going in. And CA 5, 2, 3. My 3 and 4 and 2. Swap now because those are all on cooldown. Spike Trap's up. And we can use the 2 skill. And we're going to get to CA very soon. I'm going to go in before my Dagger 2 anyways because it's probably on long enough cooldown anyways. I'm going to wait for my Bonfire here. It's almost up. And I'm going to swap. Entangle's up. And you can just kind of see I'm just kind of like pressing the buttons on a priority here. There's no set rotation, but you can kind of tell which ones are good to use first. And you generally want to stay on the kind of like the schedule of using your Celestial Avatar whenever possible, and then swapping weapons shortly after that, because you want to get some value from those weapon skills still, because you still have a little bit of time before you go into CA. But yeah, that's pretty much how the rotation works. So let's talk about the actual play of the build in real scenarios. One thing that people often forget when looking at builds is they'll look at how much damage it does and they'll forget that the utility of a build is really what makes a build meta, because even if a build does a lot of damage, if that damage is hard to land or it doesn't give its party anything, even though it's not supposed to give boons, then it usually falls off because, for example, a Scourge does pretty good damage, but it's also ranged, so it can apply it in most situations, and it gives barrier to its allies, so it's very robust, and it's great for many situations. So this build doesn't have range damage for the most part. It's quite hard to land its damage, so it's not the best at dealing damage, but what really sets it apart is the fact that it can do so much support to its allies just by simply doing its rotation. So first of all, you have the heal skill, which is the healing spring, and on this fight in particular, there's a lot of condies that go out, and if you're not a support role entirely and you're giving that much condi cleanse from the pulsing healing spring, you're giving a lot of effect to your team to win. And then when you go into CA, you use the 2 and the 3 skill, and that gives a lot of condi cleanse and healing to your allies. So just by simply existing, you're helping your teammates survive and doing your damage as well, right? But one thing that is a little bit weird is that although Druid has tons of CC, you kind of have to use it as part of your rotation. So a lot of times when a CC bar is up, you don't have your CC for it because you're using it as part of your damage. So either you have to save your damage and just wait to use it later, or just hope that your teammates have the CC, though you do have your Iboga pet, which you can swap to for the F2 there, and that'll give a little bit of CC, or just save your Celestial Avatar 3 skill, which can do a bit of CC as well. But yeah, basically all of those skills are going to be healing your allies and helping you survive. So yeah, you can actually kind of play this as like a pseudo secondary healer. Like for example, in a situation where you have 2 healers in your squad, but this very specific point of the fight, you guys keep wiping because there's too much pressure. So your Druid, which is a pure DPS role, can just go into CA during that moment and just heal. So that's kind of why I like DPS Tempest as well, because it's kind of like a pseudo half healer in times when you really need it. But yeah, Druid is really powerful for that reason, but its damage is not the most reliable, so it's not going to probably be too popular, though it really is probably, it should be really popular. But anyways, in this fight right now, we've got it to actually 30%, and in these last percentages, the boss platform gets really small, and condition cleanse becomes really relevant because these scythes that are going around the room, they'll corrupt your boons, and yeah, you're gonna get a lot of I just got corrupted right there. So yeah, I just give the CA2 to myself there, and I've got all the cleanse that I need. Now we're running out of space here, so we need to dodge. We have to CC, so I use the F2 on my pet, but as you can see here, I don't really have too much else. I can immobilize though, which is pretty nice. The permanent immobilize that this build has will eventually tax that break bar. We just got a big AoE in the center there, which is really bad. But as you can see there, I stayed in Celestial Avatar there just to heal a little bit more, so my teammates could, you know, survive through that. And then I got corrupted again, so this is pretty bad, but I'm going to cleanse myself with my CA, use the 4 skill again, and now we're going to use the CA5 there while the boss is standing still, but we got to get out of here. I keep supporting my allies as well, and we're going to run out of CA here, so we're losing a lot of DPS, but it's not really what we need here. We need to survive, so yeah, we're going to use probably our healing spring here as well in this choke point where, yeah, we're going to need to be able to revive our allies here as well. We're taking so much pressure. We need to CC. I'm going to use Entangle and my F2, but that's all I've got. I can also use my CA now, so that's pretty convenient timing. We've lost like 3 players, but we're doing pretty well still. We've got the CA burst out, and there's a wall coming, so we have to move the boss. And we're at 7%, so we just got to survive, do a little bit more damage, and we'll be able to get this. And there's one more wall coming, but I think we'll be able to avoid this, even though there's very little space. I got corrupted again. Bad positioning on my part, but we're able to heal through it. And I'm using my CA5 here. There's another big AoE dropped on us, but I get out of it. And we're just trying to do as much damage to get that last 2% down. I think the boss stops at 1%. So yeah, that's gonna be the Condi DPS Druid. If you like this content, please like the video, subscribe for more, and check out the links in the description for the updated build if it does need updating. So with that being said, I'll see you all next time.